Imagine spending your entire life trusting the people around you, only to have them tear you apart when you least expect it. This is not just a story of betrayal, this is a story about how one act of selfishness shattered everything, and how the taste of revenge can feel like the only thing left to hold on to. The wedding was supposed to be a day of celebration, a day where happiness flowed through every corner, where joy and love were supposed to shine brightly. But for her, it felt like the day the ground was ripped from beneath her feet. She had always been the quiet one, the one who stayed in the shadows, never seeking attention, never demanding anything. She was the one who quietly picked up the pieces, made the sacrifices, and carried the burdens. But on this day, everything changed. Her sister, the bride, stood at the center of it all, glowing with joy, surrounded by family and friends. And then there were her parents smiling, basking in the happiness of the day. But it wasn't the smiles that stood out to her. It was the words. Words that stung like a knife in her chest. "She just cleans houses," they had said. Their voices light, almost dismissive, as though she was nothing more than a ghost walking among them. The crowd laughed politely. The groom's parents exchanged glances. She could feel their eyes on her, sizing her up. The weight of their judgment was suffocating. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the table. The shame burned deep into her skin. All these years of hard work, all the sacrifices, all the time she had put herself aside for the sake of others, and this was how they saw her. This was how they valued her. Her heart sank as she realized that, despite everything she had done for them, they still saw her as nothing more than the help, just a girl who cleaned houses. It wasn't the first time they had treated her this way. Growing up, her parents had always placed expectations on her, never giving her the respect she deserved. Her achievements were always minimized, her pain ignored, and her dreams, if she ever dared to have them, were crushed under the weight of their indifference. But something about this moment at her sister's wedding made it feel different. It felt like the final blow, the last time they could break her without consequence. As the wedding carried on, she tried to smile, tried to play her part, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Her mind raced. The sting of those words, spoken so casually, haunted her. Every moment she spent in that room, surrounded by strangers, felt like a reminder of how invisible she had become in her own life. But what hurt the most was that it wasn't the guests who were making her feel this way. It was her own family. The tears threatened to rise, but she fought them back. She had learned to mask her emotions long ago. After all, no one cared to listen to the girl who quietly disappeared in the background. No one cared to ask what she needed, what she wanted. She was only there to serve, to take care of the messes left behind by others, both literal and emotional. But as the night wore on, something began to shift. The humiliation began to harden inside her, turning into something sharper, more dangerous. The sadness started to transform into a cold, burning rage. How could they treat her like this? How could they stand there in front of everyone and belittle everything she had done? She didn't even realize it at first, but her mind started working in overdrive. She could feel the anger building, piece by piece, like a puzzle coming together. Each piece represented a moment of neglect, a moment of rejection, a moment where they had made her feel less than human. She'd been a loyal daughter, a quiet servant, but now she was done. She was done being invisible. As the night dragged on, she found herself pulling away from the festivities, stepping into the empty garden outside. The cool air hit her skin, the quietness of the night offering her some relief. She stood there for a long while, staring at the stars above, trying to calm the chaos in her mind. But the words still echoed in her ears. They wouldn't go away. They couldn't. What had she done wrong? She had never asked for much. All she wanted was to be seen. All she wanted was to be loved, not for her sacrifices or for the things she did for others, but for who she truly was. But it wasn't just her parents. It was everyone around her. Her friends, her relatives, they all saw her as nothing more than a servant, a shadow in the background. They took from her without ever giving anything back. They had all fed off her kindness, her generosity, her silence. And now they had all but torn her apart in front of the people who mattered most. The tears came now, falling freely down her cheeks. She let them. She let herself feel the depth of the betrayal. It was a weight she could no longer carry on her own. But as the tears fell, something else began to grow inside her. It was a new feeling. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't even anger. It was something darker, something more complex. It was the cold, calculated feeling of revenge. For years, she had suffered quietly, never once standing up for herself, never once demanding what she deserved. She had given everything, and for what? To be overlooked, dismissed, and abandoned when it mattered most. But now she could feel the taste of revenge in the air, sharp and bitter, like a wine too strong to swallow. It was a dangerous thought, one she hadn't entertained for, but now it felt like the only thing that could fill the emptiness inside her. Her gaze turned cold as she wiped the tears from her face. Revenge wasn't just about making them pay for what they had done. It was about showing them that she was someone they couldn't ignore, someone they couldn't control. She wasn't just the girl who cleaned houses. She was someone capable of destroying everything they had built, piece by piece. The plan began to take shape in her mind. She wasn't sure how it would unfold, but she knew one thing. The moment was coming. The moment when she would no longer be the invisible daughter. She would make them see her. She would make them regret the day they ever underestimated her. As she stood in the garden, the cool breeze brushing against her skin, she made a decision. It was a painful decision. Her heart ached as she realized what she was about to do, but the pain only fueled her resolve. She couldn't go on like this. She couldn't live in the shadows anymore. And if her family wasn't going to respect her, then she would show them just how powerful someone could be when pushed too far. Her mind raced with possibilities. How would she do it? What steps would she need to take? There was no going back from this. The plan would have to be perfect, but it was the only thing that could give her the satisfaction she needed. For the first time in her life, she felt in control. The quiet, invisible girl was gone. She'd been replaced by someone stronger, someone determined to reclaim what was rightfully hers. And the first move? She would make them watch. Watch as she took back the power they had stolen from her, piece by piece. But that was a story for the next part. Her heart was heavy with the weight of what she was about to do, but it was a burden she was ready to carry. The sting of the words lingered in her mind long after the wedding reception had ended. She just cleans houses. The laughter that followed echoed through her soul, the mocking tone like a poison creeping through her veins. It was supposed to be a joyous day, a celebration of love and family, but instead, it had felt like a cruel reminder of everything she had been denied. Her mind raced as she replayed the moments leading up to the wedding speech, everything she had endured, every sacrifice, every rejection. How had it all come to this? She'd always been the one who supported her family, the one who held everything together. But in that moment, her parents' words shattered the carefully constructed image of love she had tried to hold on to. The weight of their dismissal crushed her chest, leaving her breathless. How could they? The thoughts circled her mind like vultures, tearing at her sense of self. She had given everything to them, poured out her love and devotion, and this was the thanks she got? She remembered the moments of her childhood, the times she had felt warmth and affection, moments that seemed so far away now, like distant dreams. She had believed in them, believed in the illusion of family. She had spent years cooking their meals, washing their clothes, tending to their needs. She had never asked for anything in return, never complained about the long hours or the emotional toll it took on her. She had always been the silent one, the one who kept her feelings hidden, because she believed that if she kept giving, they would eventually see her. But now, after all these years, she realized how wrong she had been. The silence after the speech was deafening. She had stood there, frozen, unable to move, as everyone around her applauded the groom's words. It was as if she were invisible, a ghost in her own family. She had felt like an outsider in her own life. The people who were supposed to love and protect her had turned her into a joke. The realization was like a blow to the chest, knocking the breath out of her. She could hear her sister's laughter, her voice filled with joy, as she danced with her new husband. But in that moment, it felt like a betrayal in itself. How could she not know? How could she not see what was happening? Her sister had always been the golden child, the one who got everything she wanted, the one who was always praised and loved. And yet, there she was, dancing with a man who had just publicly humiliated their sister. It was a slap in the face, a wound that went deeper than anything physical. Her sister had never once stepped in to defend her, never once spoken up against the unfair treatment she had endured. She didn't even know me. That thought hit her like a freight train, and her chest tightened in a way that made it hard to breathe. She had spent so many years believing that her family cared for her, that they would eventually see her worth. But in that moment, all the years of loyalty, all the years of giving, suddenly felt meaningless. She wasn't even worth defending. She stumbled away from the crowd, retreating to the dimly lit hallway outside the ballroom. Her head was spinning, her heart pounding in her chest. She needed to get away, needed to think, to breathe, to process everything that had just happened. The coolness of the hallway offered her some relief, but the feeling of suffocation in her chest didn't subside. Her parents' faces flashed in her mind, her father's cold, distant gaze, her mother's dismissive smile. She could still see the way they looked at her when they said those words. The utter lack of care. She just cleans houses. Her body trembled as the rage built up inside her, hot and bitter, like acid eating away at her insides. How dare they? How dare they treat her like this? How dare they reduce her entire existence to something so small, so insignificant? She remembered the countless nights she had stayed up late, making sure everything was perfect for them. The way she had stayed silent when they criticized her, when they treated her like a servant in her own home. She had never once raised her voice, never once fought back. She had convinced herself that if she just kept doing everything right, if she just kept sacrificing, they would eventually see her. But now she realized how foolish she had been. The truth was, they had never seen her at all. She slammed her fist against the wall, the pain shooting through her knuckles, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered anymore. Her entire life had been built on a lie, a fantasy she had created in her mind to make sense of the love she had never received. But now the cracks in that illusion had shattered wide open. I'm done. The words burned in her mind like a vow, and with them came a new clarity. No more silence. No more bending over backward for people who would never appreciate her. The time for being the invisible daughter was over. She was done being the background character in her own life. It was time to take control. It was time for them to see her. But how? How could she make them understand the depth of the pain they had caused her? How could she make them realize what they had done? Her thoughts raced, and a plan began to take shape, not out of desperation, but out of a deep, cold sense of justice, revenge. It wasn't about hurting them, at least not physically. It was about making them pay for their disregard, making them understand what it felt like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to be overlooked. She wasn't going to beg for their love. She wasn't going to make them see her by becoming more like them. No, she would show them what it felt like to lose something important. She would show them the consequences of their selfishness. They had taken her worth and turned it into nothing, but now she would take it back. Her mind buzzed with ideas, each one more calculated than the last. She would make them realize that she was someone they couldn't ignore, someone they had underestimated for far too long. She would make them regret every moment they had ever dismissed her, every time they had looked down on her, every time they had treated her as less than human. I'll make them regret this. Her hands shook with a mixture of anger and determination as the plan continued to form. She didn't know exactly how she would do it, but one thing was clear. It was time for her to rise. Time for them to see her not just as the daughter who cleaned houses, but as someone who had the power to change everything. But even as the plan took shape, a part of her hesitated. There was a small voice inside her, one that whispered doubts into her mind, telling her that revenge would only lead to more pain, that it would destroy whatever was left of her soul. But that voice was growing quieter with every passing moment. She had given them everything, her loyalty, her love, her time, and what had she received in return? Nothing. No respect. No recognition. Nothing but pain. The realization hit her like a wave. The one thing they had taken from her was her power, the power to stand up for herself, the power to be seen. She wasn't going to let them take that from her anymore. As she stood in the hallway, staring out at the wedding guests still celebrating in the distance, she made her decision. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming herself. It was about taking back the power she'd given away for so long. And with that, she stepped into the darkness of the night, ready to make her move. But as she walked away, her heart weighed heavy with the knowledge that this would change everything. Once the plan was set in motion, there would be no turning back. The consequences of her actions would be irreversible. But for the first time in her life, she didn't care. She was done being invisible, and now they would see her. The darkness ahead felt like freedom. Her body trembled as she walked away from the wedding reception, the laughter of the guests still ringing in her ears. It was as if she had been left behind, standing on the edge of a world that moved on without her. The weight of the moment pressed heavily on her chest, each breath a struggle. The cold night air did little to numb the burning pain that had taken root deep within her. How could they? The words she had overheard, the ones that had felt like a dagger in her heart, replayed over and over in her mind. She just cleans houses. It wasn't just a careless remark, it was a sharp, biting reminder of everything she had been reduced to. All her years of hard work, all the time she had put her own dreams on hold, had meant nothing. She had been nothing more than a tool for their convenience, a shadow that hovered in the background, unnoticed and unimportant. But now that shadow was beginning to grow, taking on a life of its own. Her parents had always been distant, emotionally unavailable and cold in their affections. She had spent her entire life trying to win their love, trying to prove that she was worthy of their attention, their pride. Yet every time she thought she had come close, they would retreat, pulling back into their world, leaving her alone with the remnants of her shattered hopes. She remembered the countless hours she had spent in the kitchen, making meals for them, cleaning up after their mess, all while they ignored her presence, as if she were just another servant in their house. But this was different. The final blow had been struck, and it cut deeper than she could have ever imagined. Her sister, her own flesh and blood, had never once stepped in to defend her, to stand up for her against the injustice. How could she not see it? Her mind reeled with the realization that the betrayal wasn't just a single act. It had been happening all along, piece by piece, slowly chipping away at the foundation of trust that she had built with her family. Every gesture of kindness, every smile, every word of encouragement from her parents had been laced with a subtle, quiet condescension that she had been too blind to see before. They had never truly seen her. They had seen only what they wanted to see, a daughter who existed to serve them, to meet their expectations, to keep their world running smoothly. But the truth was slowly becoming clear now. She wasn't just invisible to them, she was expendable. The tears that had been threatening to fall now spilled freely down her face, the weight of her emotions too much to bear. She had loved them. She had given them everything she had, and this was how they had repaid her. She could feel the bitterness rising within her, twisting her insides like a knife. She'd have been nothing more than a tool to them, a means to an end. And now that she was no longer useful, they had discarded her, cast her aside like an old rag. No more, I won't let them destroy me. Her fists clenched at her sides as the rage inside her began to build. It wasn't the kind of rage that flared up quickly, only to burn out in the span of a few moments. No, this was deeper and more dangerous. This was the kind of rage that simmered quietly, building up with each insult, each dismissal, until it finally boiled over into something uncontainable. She had given so much of herself to them, and they had taken it all without a second thought. But now it was her turn. It was time for them to feel the sting of her absence. It was time for them to realize the consequences of their actions. She remembered the night she had graduated high school. Her parents had barely shown up. They had been too busy with work, too consumed by their own lives to make the time to support her. She had stood there, alone in a sea of proud families, watching as the other students were surrounded by their parents, receiving hugs and congratulations. But for her, there had been nothing. No applause, no cheering. Just a brief handshake from her father and a quiet, "Good job." That was all. And yet she had held on to the hope that someday they would see her. that someday they would recognize the sacrifices she had made, the things she had given up to keep their lives in order. But now, as she stood on the cold streets outside the wedding venue, she realized that hope had been nothing but a cruel joke. The image of her sister's wedding, of the love and joy in the air, only intensified the feeling of abandonment. She had always been the quiet one, the one who stayed in the background, never demanding attention. But now, as the sting of the betrayal lingered, she realized how much she had allowed herself to be invisible. It was time to change that. It's time to make them see me. Her mind churned with thoughts of revenge, each one more intricate and calculated than the last. She would make them regret the way they had treated her. But it wouldn't be about instant retribution. No, it would be much more painful than that. She would make them feel the weight of their actions slowly, methodically, until they realized what they had lost. The plan began to take shape in her mind, a plan born from years of resentment, frustration, and betrayal. It wasn't just about striking back, it was about reclaiming what was rightfully hers: respect, dignity, and most importantly, her power. She had been silent for so long, had allowed herself to be silenced, but now it was her turn to make a statement. Her hands trembled as she reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. She stared at the screen for a moment, her finger hovering over the contacts list. There were so many people she could reach out to, so many ways she could use her knowledge, her influence, to make her parents and her sister feel the consequences of their actions. But she hesitated. Her conscience nagged at her, whispering doubts in the back of her mind. Was this the right thing to do? Was revenge really the answer? Do they deserve it? Her thoughts flickered back to the many years of abuse and neglect. The years of silence, the years of swallowing her pride and putting up with the emotional neglect. She had suffered so much, and all for what? To be treated as if she didn't matter? To be dismissed as if her worth could be reduced to a simple, callous comment? The answer was clear now. They deserved it. They deserved to feel the pain they had caused her, to understand the depth of the betrayal they had inflicted upon her. The first step of the plan was simple: expose their hypocrisy. She would show them how easily they had destroyed her with their words, their actions. She would force them to look at the consequences of their behavior and, in doing so, force them to see her, not as the quiet daughter who cleaned houses, but as someone worthy of respect, someone who had the power to change everything. As the pieces of the plan came together in her mind, she felt a sense of calm settle over her. This wasn't about anger anymore. This wasn't about trying to hurt them. This was about taking control of her own life, her own fate. She would no longer be the invisible one. She would no longer let them walk all over her. But even as the plan took shape, a part of her still carried the weight of what was to come. This wasn't going to be easy. Revenge was never easy. It would change everything. It would change her family, but at this point she didn't care anymore. They don't deserve my silence. She looked out into the darkness, her eyes cold and determined. The path ahead was clear now. She was going to take back her power. And when the time came, they would see her for who she truly was. And when they did, they would regret ever thinking they could push her aside. With a deep breath, she turned and walked into the night, the weight of her decision heavy in her heart, but the fire in her soul burning brighter than ever. The stage was set. The game had begun.